I mean, the number one mistake is being overly obsessed with the follower numbers, the view numbers, because that leads you to growth hack rather than really grow fandom.
Chris, what's happening, man? How are you feeling today?
What's up, Sam? How we doing?
Not much. We are good.
How's LA?
LA is fantastic. Sunny. La La Land. Gotta love it.
Nice.
Definitely took my safety precautions on the flight over here from New York City.
That's good. That's good. You got to do that.
Exactly. Soon we'll be hanging out in Wormhole, so we won't even have to worry about flying anywhere, which leads us right into our incredible guest today, Phil Ranta. He is the COO of Wormhole Labs, which is a very, very ambitious project that he'll talk a little bit more about later. Prior to working and helping build this new virtual universe, if you will, with Wormhole Labs, he helped focus on building the Facebook gamer community by partnering with different creators and gamers as Facebook continues to build a bigger community of gamers on their platform. Prior to that, he played a critical role at some of the world's biggest multi-channel networks, so Fullscreen, Studio71. These are essentially organizations that partner with hundreds, if not thousands, of the biggest YouTube channels and find ways to help them grow their channels and reach more people. I think one thing that's really fascinating while he was working at Studio71, over the course of around 3 years, he helped them grow from the multi-channel network grow from 1 billion monthly views to over 8 million monthly views with over 1,000 different creators. So I thought it was an incredible episode. Some of the things that really stuck out to me were doing things that don't scale. I think when people are trying to build different communities, it's so easy to think, oh, what's the virtual community that we're going to create? Or how can we do this in a way that it's going to service tens of thousands of people? But in reality, and as he'll dive into deeper, a lot of it's trying to create these personal connections and facilitate personal engagement with different channel partners or people that might be a stepping stone to massive community. And even there, scale can be an illusion because oftentimes it's better to have 1,000 true fans than 100,000 semi-quasi fans. The last thing I really enjoyed, and tons more, but are how brands can leverage tactics of some of the biggest content creators online. I think a lot of these different YouTubers and quote unquote, if you will, influencers are pioneering a lot of the different tactics for building meaningful communities online. So I think obviously Phil has a lot of experience in facilitating growth for these creators and how he was able to deconstruct some of their tactics so that way you can apply it to growing a community around your brand was really incredible. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I thought it was pretty amazing. I mean, just going back to Wormhole, for example, I mean, this is an incredibly ambitious project. They're trying to build a whole social community in this metaverse that they're creating, in this beta mode right now. And it's just really impressive because you think about, building entirely new areas for people to interact. I mean, that's got to be pretty special. So that was pretty cool. And then also, I think, just in general, his seasoned history of helping a community of creators basically understand that they can actually be brands and how they can monetize themselves and how they can, in turn, by doing that, basically bring joy and happiness to the people who are, consuming their content. So I just think it's really awesome. And he's worked across a lot of different verticals. When you think about the MCNs, it's, you've got foodie channels, you've got lifestyle channels. He's seemed to have carved out kind of in the latter part of his career, at least up to now, a really heavy focus in gaming, which is obviously on a huge category that's on the rise. So I think that we're going to learn a lot here.
Yeah, for sure. Well, without any further ado, Mr. Phil Ranta. Phil, what's up, man? How are we doing today?
Doing good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, very excited, man. I think you bring a breadth of really incredible experience that'll be super valuable for our listeners. For starters, I know recently you kind of jumped back into the startup world and are doing some work with Wormhole Labs. And I do want to set the stage because I think you guys are creating a very unique product and environment. So I'd love to just start with even some foundational context on what is Wormhole Labs and how are you really trying to build kind of a thriving community around it?
Yeah. So Wormhole Labs is building or has already built a flagship technology called Wormhole, where you can exist as an avatar within a user-generated world and then use that avatar to teleport or wormhole across the world to chat, meet, shop, live broadcast, date. It's kind of like a live simulation of the real world created with the power of the crowd. So it's definitely a big swing in the future of a post-feed social environment.
That's awesome. Hey, Phil, question for you. So that's obviously like a really ambitious project, but are you guys looking to any like certain targeted communities to start rolling this thing out to?
Yeah, well, we think that the most natural first target community is gamers. The idea that, and we're not talking about like esports hardcore gamers, but the idea of people who game, so kind of that whole generation.
Right.
Because they're already used to chatting avatar to avatar, right? Most people who are, say, playing Fortnite or Roblox or Minecraft or coming up through those generations already get it. It's less of a lift. So they're an initial target market. In fact, we were at TwitchCon last year. This was before I joined on the team as one of the sponsors, and the gamers lost it when they saw the technology. So,
Nice.
But down the road, we want to make sure that it's a place it's a software that's more accessible to all types of people and businesses.
Right. That actually makes me think about the new gaming network, because that's a more general market, right? So I'd imagine that would be like a target platform to start rolling this out on, right?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Venn kind of touches on something which is really smart, kind of the same thing G4 did, which is there's 2.5 billion people around the world who play video games. Although a lot of their core source of entertainment is video games, there's also a fair amount of punditry that can go into that, or lifestyle, or what do people that like video games like to wear, what kind of shoes do they buy. It's tapping into a real lifestyle and community. And likewise at Wormhole, we think that there's going to be a lot of opportunity for kind of tech forward people to use this as a way to build community. And as it becomes more accessible and reaches more types of people in different ways, it'll kind of tighten into or broaden out to a larger demographic.
Definitely. I'm guilty. Like I'm totally a Venn user, right? Because I'm not hardcore gamer, but I've been gaming for my entire life. So I definitely appreciate what they're doing over there.
Same here. Yeah. It's fortunate I've been able to dip in and out of the gaming worlds through my career, because, when I was 5 years old playing 8-bit Nintendo, I didn't think there was any career in this, sans maybe being a programmer. And now it's just this incredible ecosystem and esports and just a beautiful place to be.
It's pretty amazing. Well, why don't we take a step back for a second? So, obviously you were number 9 at Fullscreen, and, made a huge impact there. I'd love to just kind of hear about the challenges that you're facing over there, what you guys are trying to do to build it up to, the number 1 MCN at the time, and, just kind of hear about the creator community that you built over there.
Yeah, it was interesting. So at the time when I joined Fullscreen, I knew that Machinima existed. I kind of heard a little bit about Maker. I had already been working in digital content, but mostly on, say, the mobile phone side or the brand side for about 7 years at that point. But, when Fullscreen came about and they said, the initial pitch to Fullscreen was, it's an MCN, we're going to be working with creators, but it's going to be really technology backed, right? They were the first ones to create a creator dashboard, for example, where they could access and see things. I thought it was just really smart. So as somebody who had been a creator and who had worked a lot on social platforms, I joined as the first head of network. And frankly, I was surprised when we started reaching out to creators we thought were interesting. Most of them never thought about themselves as businesses. Most of them didn't even monetize at that point. It was 2012. So, there was really, you had to directly apply to get monetization. So MCNs were kind of a sneaky way to get people into this ecosystem where they can start making money. And then at that point, it was just really kind of organization and value proposition. We scaled the team very quickly. We got really tactical about how we grew channels and how we advise channels and how we do our outreach. After joining, I believe it was 8 months later, according to comScore, we were already the biggest MCN in the world.
It's wild. Were there any like pitfalls? Sorry, Sam, to jump in, but were there any pitfalls that existed, in terms of, join the Fullscreen community versus the Machinima community, or, like what was the competition like in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, a fair amount of it was just built around branding. Machinima was so big in the gaming world. Maker was big in the kind of high-end comedy celebrity world, I guess, just because it was started by, Shay Carl and, whereas where we saw our niche was a lot of the kind of brand-friendly channels that nobody else is paying attention to. In fact, we kind of started in the upper mid-tier where we can kind of introduce these already big YouTubers, right? These were people with hundreds of thousands of subscribers, which at that time was the equivalent of millions of subscribers, who never really talked to a business person about how to run their channel as a business. So we started introducing the concept of, this is how you track your CPMs. This is how you can increase your CPMs. This is the power of collaboration, and how can we help you set up collaborations. We started introducing more brands into their world. So it's the stuff that you look at now and say, well, duh, that's how everybody does it. But back then it was really novel and interesting because really no one had paved that path yet.
Yeah, no, that's crazy. And I think how did your experience in scaling Fullscreen differ from what you did at Studio71? Because I know there it was, similar exponential crazy growth. Growing the network from over 1 billion to over 8 billion monthly views, and then as well as kind of establishing this community of 1,000 different creators.
Yeah, Studio71, even though both were, I guess, quote unquote MCNs, it was a completely different world and a completely different value proposition. I think it's Studio71, since they started as The Collective, which was a Hollywood management company, and then kind of backed into digital, whereas Fullscreen started as a digital company and then ran after the MCN thing. It's just a completely different mentality. So in 71, it was more about working with top creators like Billy Singh and Rhett and Link and The Rock and Roman Atwood. We were more specific about who we approached. We were, a little bit more lean in when it came to the management and the brand side. So really scale on that side was more about how do we build a hyper white glove, hyper premium experience for people who were in our network.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And then when it comes to some of the best practices, because I think in both Fullscreen and Studio71, the growth was phenomenal across the just general kind of the portfolio and network as a whole, and how many views and different creators you were able to really bring into the network. What have you learned when it comes to growing communities? I know you were kind of both growing communities on the creator side as well as helping the creators build up their communities. So what have been some of the biggest takeaways that you've seen when it comes to kind of unlocking that serious growth?
Yeah, a lot of, especially on the creator side, a lot of building that community is about building trust, right? Because there's a lot of people trying to work their way into their universe and take a revenue split. So if you're really value oriented and you appreciate their time, and you're very specific about what initiatives you bring them into and how you bring them into those initiatives, and that's really kind of the secret there. And then making the creators a community of their own, right? Is when you're in something like Fullscreen Studio71, how do you make everyone feel like they're part of this brand, right? And it's not just sending t-shirts, but down to the roster level. If you have a talent manager, how do you make sure everybody who's on that talent manager's rosters feel like they kind of know each other and they're on the same team and they're working together?
Is that just curating a lot of introductions, or tactically, how are you building that community amongst creators?
Yeah, it's some of it's introduction, some of it's collab, some of it's just making sure that when you're at VidCon or when you're at Playlist Live that you're doing something special, right? And you're tied to the hip to your top clients, and you're making sure that they're getting all their needs met.
For sure.
It really is the little things,
No, I like it. And I know even in tech, I think it's like Paul Graham has been very popularized for, it might be somebody else, but like do things that don't scale. And I think when it comes to like community, that human touch and that human element, especially, it goes a long way. And obviously you can't necessarily do that for the 8 billion monthly views and all those, but when it comes to channel partners, and if you have like 15 people that are kind of the stepping stone for 1 billion views, being able to have that human personal touch is a super valuable asset.
Yeah, that being a YouTuber is the illusion of having a one-on-one connection anyways, especially when you're a vlogger, right? So it's you talking to you. And even though you're talking to 5 million views, you're still one person talking to one person, right? So when it comes to building community on that side, it's always important to, know your audience really well, know what they value, make sure that you're delivering what they want. But also, it's such a buzzword and it's so gross, but being authentic to who you are and to what they expect, and not authenticity as I'm going to tell you what my boogers look like, right? Like it's not. It's more just like having a real brand, knowing what your brand is and knowing why people value you, and then just being really earnest and honest around developing your audience around that.
Yeah, that's interesting. So we met at PAX East, right? Like right before the pandemic happened.
Right, yeah.
And I think Facebook actually had told you guys not to travel, and you still went ahead and did it.
Yeah, well, it was kind of the closing the door on it.
Right.
Like at that point, I already knew that this might be the last chance to see our talent, and I knew to wear a mask and to wash hands, even just because I was watching the news out of China, and I'm like, all right, they've been through this, so I'm gonna take a cue. But yeah, we wanted to make sure that we were taking care of our community, and we knew they were going already, so had to do it.
Right. I remember avoiding touching any controller whatsoever out there just because of
I did no demos. Yeah, I didn't do any demos. I tried to minimize my time in the conference hall. Mm-hmm. We were playing it super, super safe.
Yeah. But that's it brings up a good point. That's a really competitive environment, right? Bringing talent and putting it under Facebook's umbrella, or, if you're looking at Twitch or, Mixer or any of the guys that were at play during that point in time. What was that like in that environment?
Yeah, well, it's, Facebook's value proposition is extremely different to a YouTube or a Twitch or even a Mixer was at the time. Mm-hmm. Because all of Facebook streaming is built on top of Pages technology, right? Which at its core is building a community by putting up posts. And live stream is a different type of post. Whereas on Twitch, it's like a channel and you're targeting people through live video, and they're responding back through comments. And that's kind of the beginning and the end of the story. We were looking for those more, let's say, community-oriented streamers. And some that frankly were like when we signed Ronda Rousey, somebody who was just popular on Instagram and Facebook, was a gaming enthusiast. And then it was kind of introducing them the other way, which is showing them how to stream, how to kind of show their love for this, and then launching them through game streaming that way. So it presented a lot of really interesting challenges, but also a lot of really interesting opportunities for, traditional celebrities, kind of the non-hardcore gamers, or the gamers who wanted to take their community to the next level and be able to integrate them in different ways.
Nice. Did you guys, so when you were onboarding talent over at Facebook, would you give them, because this might be relevant to any brand out there, but were you giving them any sort of playbook in terms of how to engage with their community authentically, or, any just kind of key points of, beyond just kind of their personal celebrity and just streaming? What were some of the things that you guys would advise them to do?
Yeah, I mean, we had kind of our bland playbook, like anyone can access it online, best practices. Right. But when you got down to the talent manager level, a lot of the advice was specific to them and their communities. And a lot of it is looking into the data, seeing what's working and what's not working, and developing their communities that way. So, for example, I'll go back to Ronda Rousey. She has a really interesting community because she's got a vlog that's about kind of sustainable farming and kind of her vlogs about living on a farm. She also naturally has her WWE and MMA audience. And then she also had a gamer audience. So we're trying to figure out how we could bring all of those things together and really celebrate all of these as one thing. So a lot of it was, how does she keep her style, which is a little in your face, while also doing kind of the non-core gaming stuff, which was mostly centered around Nintendo and fun and a backdrop to let her personality shine. And we really grew the community that way, which worked out really well.
Interesting. And then would you extend that onto, platforms like Instagram, and, what was kind of the content strategy around that?
Oh yeah. I mean, that's also exists on a creator level too. A lot of times people want different platforms to show different sides of themselves. But yeah, I mean, a lot of Rhonda was using Instagram for was kind of promotion and alerts to, I'm about to stream, it's going to be really fun doing these things. But she was also kind of doing snippets of her vlogs and also pictures of her with her, celebrity friends. So Instagram was used as a way to kind of fill out her personality. And then Facebook was used as kind of the hub of her content.
Interesting.
That's awesome. So, I mean, what's been fascinating too, and even in referencing examples like that, it's like creators are so often at the forefront of building audiences online. So much so that I think they're kind of like the early adopters paving the way. And then we see brands try and leverage a lot of the same tactics that these different creators or internet influencers, if you will, are going about approaching building their audiences and brands. What, in your experience, having worked with so many creators and doing so at scale, what have been, from now working on the brand side and looking to scale and launch a brand, what are some of the core elements that you've seen lead to community growth around creators that you think brands should take into consideration as they're evaluating their community growth strategies?
Oh man, we could write a book on this. I would say that the number one thing is really knowing your brand and not faking it, right? Not what your brand wants to be, but what your brand is. Because like if you look at somebody like, I don't know if you follow Wendy's on Twitter, but genius community building. It's very kind of funny and in your face. They do rap battles with other fast food restaurants. And the way that they did it was acknowledging that Wendy's is a burger brand and that they're a fast food chain and it's a little corporate-y, and then becoming a little meta and turning it on its head and kind of forcing the branded message in a way that somebody who is kind of commenting or making fun of the fact that they're a corporate brand is doing a little bit. And that's what made it really shine, right? Where it was still like, this is a brand for Wendy's or an offshoot for the brand for Wendy's, but also it's community building because it's genuinely funny and it feels really human. It's kind of the same way when you look at brands and creators, is like, how do you create like a creator through the lens of your brand? The only way you can do that is really knowing the lens of your brand. So if you're, State Farm Insurance, you're not saying, well, State Farm Insurance is the most punk rock thing in the world. And, like what we're sexy and sleek. Instead, it's like knowing that, you're a utility that a lot of people need to access. Then how do I build the community around understanding that we're a little bit more straightforward, a little bit more functional, but also a lot of gamers could really use us. So maybe we do want to, sponsor the big gamers in a really interesting way,
Totally.
What are some of the, I know you talk a lot on LinkedIn, for example. I follow you, so you've got a lot of ideas and a lot of opinions, and I think it's really valuable. It's awesome, and you've obviously got this just huge breadth of experience in building communities. What do you think are some of the most common pitfalls that you see and come across, whether that's in your own work that you've done over, historically, or like, what you've seen? What are some things that you think that, brands should watch out for, things that they should be doing, maybe ahead of time in order to correct for that?
Totally. I mean, the number one mistake that's always been made by brands and is still being made by brands every time is being overly obsessed with the follower numbers, the view numbers, the engagement numbers, because that leads you to growth hack rather than really grow fandom. Like, I would rather have 1,000 diehard fans who are absorbing my every word and transacting around me. And if I tell them to go to a concert, they'd go to a concert, than a million casual fans that might check me out here or there. I might show up in their feed, And the reason why is like, if you become obsessed with the numbers and all you care about is the numbers, then that's a really flimsy fandom that goes away really quickly. So you got to just keep paying into it, and you got to keep growth hacking, and and you start to see that with a lot of top YouTube channels that kind of go away. Is people were doing something that was gimmicky or clickbaity, and then the market becomes saturated, and a lot of people start doing it, and then they disappear. And they said, what happened? I had 2 million subscribers and now I've got 30,000 views per video. Well, you never really had those fans in the first place, right? You were kind of bringing them in, but not really taking care of them. And so more than half of the brands think about things this way, and it's really frustrating, right? It's like, how many likes can I get on this tweet rather than, is this tweet causing delight in my community?
Right.
So once the ones that have solved for that and really built it out, they're going to be benefiting from these programs for years because their fandom isn't going anywhere. Like Wendy's on Twitter, they had a little bit of controversy a few months ago when they went dark for a week. They came back and they were still strong. And the reason why is because people genuinely like their content and they genuinely want to see what they have to say. And I think that more brands need to start thinking of their communities in that way.
Yeah, that's interesting. That makes me think about, at the end of the day, right, a brand is trying to make a sale. But you want to make sure that you have these diehard super fans, right? Mm-hmm. Who have you seen that's done a good job in this, just across social in general, but who you see that's done a good job of like interweaving kind of like, D2C commerce with, content strategy?
Yeah, so many. I mean, I think that Chipotle's done a great job kind of being on the cutting edge. They jumped into TikTok before anybody else that I saw in terms of brands, and they crushed it. They did great. I feel like a lot of media brands jumped into YouTube in the right way and started building it. And frankly, in our early days of Fullscreen and even over to Studio71, we did a lot of kind of brand launches. We worked with The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon and a lot of Fox properties to launch their YouTube channels. And it was an education. It was like, don't just put up your commercials, but put up exclusives, things that have real value. They were all great at it. The D2C stuff, man, I mean, so many are doing great. Target's been doing some really interesting stuff through the years, especially when it comes to working with influencers and kind of bigger stunt style stuff. Even, I don't know if you've been seeing what kind of Burger King has been doing with their kind of lightly roasting McDonald's through their digital strategy. But I thought it was really shrewd and smart, like when you're trying to hit the Gen Z market in your Burger King, like how do you do it? Well, you lightly make fun of your competitor, right? And they did, I think it was, I'm going to get this wrong, so you might have to correct me later, but I believe that they did a thing where you could get a free Whopper, but only if you ordered it from a McDonald's parking lot.
Right.
So you had to go to a McDonald's parking lot, order the free Whopper, and then go over to
brilliant.
Genius, right? Because it's their way of saying, like, we're going to flood our competitors' parking lots with non-buyers, right?
Right. It sounds like the key takeaway is look to all the fast food brands.
Fast food brands are great at it, Well, I think that also because they depend on young people, a lot of the brands that depend on young people would like what Totino's Pizza Rolls did with Tim and Eric, really abstract stuff. You're starting to see it kind of seep into television commercials too. A lot of it feels like YouTube when you're a Gen Z brand. Like they'll actually have stuff that feels like unboxing videos or beauty videos. And it's just they know their market, and they know where their market is and how to address them. And a lot of it's through online content.
Yeah. No, it's amazing. So I think now as we come to a close, we do have one question that we like to ask all our guests. And I think a lot of what you've already said kind of sets the stage well. But if you were starting a new D2C, direct-to-consumer product company from scratch, what would the product be? And how would you go about building a community?
Oh, geez. This is putting me on the spot.
That's right. Best ideas come, man.
Right, totally. No, if I was starting a D2C, this is going to sound really bland, but it's also true. I would be looking at items that lead to not just a social distancing world now, but a social distancing future. So I'd be looking at how to get hand sanitizers into people's pockets or into their lifestyle in a more scalable way. I would look at kind of the fashion around masks, or how to make masks a little bit more accessible and interesting. I think there's a D2C brand that should be popping from there that, frankly, we've seen drop shipping companies kind of take over. Because I think a lot of people think that this mentality is temporary, and I don't. Right? I think that 10 years from now, you're going to see people wearing masks on airplanes too. And the way that I would go to market with it is I would go through the style community and say, look, this is something we all have to fight through. Gen Z is hyper aware about kind of public good. So they're more likely to be the wear a mask type of people or the wash your hands type of people. And if they can have something that's like novel and interesting, and something that actually like can go with outfits, and make you look different and elevated, I think that you could have a real winner there.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. And when you say go through the style community, what exactly do you mean? You mean kind of partner and collab with different creators or influencers that already have a big community in that world of style, or what do you mean?
Oh yeah, I would start with Instagram stories and swipe ups and work my way through there.
Mm-hmm.
Like Instagram stories is still, even though a lot of people are buying against it, it's still one of the best kept secrets in the world in terms of conversion. You put up a good story and get people to ask people to swipe up, it crushes any other type of conversion on any other platform by far.
Yeah, for sure. There we go. Well, let me know when you release the mask so we can be styling together, man.
As soon as I find some free time, I'll do it.
Yeah. All right. We'll wear them inside.
You're not busy at all.
Yeah.
Well, Phil, really appreciate you coming on. I think all the work you've been able to do, the communities you've been able to build, and everything that you've got in store with Wormhole is truly incredible, man. So I appreciate you coming on and sharing some insight.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. This is great.
Thanks, Phil.
Definitely.
Thanks.
Damn, well, that was a great episode, man. What do you think, Chris?
That was pretty powerful stuff. I mean, Phil's got a lot of background in helping develop communities and galvanizing communities, and it's just, it's awesome to hear from somebody like him who's done it at, such an impressive level of scale.
Yeah, for sure. No, I mean, especially being able to not only drive growth across all these different businesses, but largely doing it in a way where he's partnering with and facilitating community growth with different creators. So I think it's really interesting. I think his perspective as to how he would scale a D2C brand was interesting, as far as really doubling down on Instagram stories. I think there's a lot of merit to that. I think your ability to get super targeted and run very fresh creative is very, very strong there. I think to the extent that you can co-create content with other influencers, and potentially run that and boost that as paid creative in paid media campaigns is also a powerful tactic. I think his experience in ensuring that creators are building and creating lots of very interesting content and using that to consistently grow their communities over time is largely what's been at the foundation of a lot of the growth that he's helped spearhead. And I think that's one thing that brands really need to lean into a lot more, is finding those unique ways to create non-directly promotional content. And I think even when it comes to some of these different, like the restaurants or different brands he mentioned, it's because they're finding these fun ways to create content that isn't overt promotion, which ultimately then, laddering back to the point you made, Chris, is, I mean, you want to facilitate these transactions by building that level of engagement, that level of community, that connection, that by creating this fun content that isn't trying right off top to build and facilitate that transaction, you're setting yourself up to make that transaction. So it really stood out to me. What stood out to you, Chris? Yeah,
and it's all trial and error, right? So we've got these dynamic communities, and there are lots of different ways that we can authentically engage them. And so just kind of being nimble and being able to think about that thoughtfully, I think, is really important. And then taking some risks, right? You brought up how Wendy's was doing some light trolling. He obviously called out how Chipotle was the first brand on TikTok from a QSR, which is quick service restaurants for those who aren't familiar. One of the first brands on TikTok, and they crushed it. If anybody saw that news, so I think that's really, really cool. And at the end of the day, I guess we all got to get in the business of social distancing, right? So it sounds like that's where the big money's at.
Yeah, there we go. Well, there you have it. Brad Community Podcast Hot Take. We appreciate your support. Hope you found this valuable. And we'll be back next week. Thanks again.